Hey guys, thank you so much for coming to my channel. If you haven't been watching my video, please make sure you do. If you have not yet subscribed, I would really appreciate if you can please subscribe. And also, if you have already subscribed to my channel, I really just want to say thank you so much. And however, if you are having any specific topic that you would like me to do a video on, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment so I can do a video to help clarify any doubt or any challenges that you may be having. Again, today I want to show you guys actually how to create a sprint in Jira. But before we proceed in creating a sprint, this is actually going to be a really short video. But before we proceed in creating the sprint, it's first of all good for you to understand what really is a sprint. So a sprint is pretty much just a fixed time period, right? It's a time frame. It's a time frame that your team, on how long your team wants to deliver their work. So depends on where you work. Some companies are doing, or I would say some teams are doing a 2 week sprint, some are doing 3 week sprint, some maybe even 4 weeks, but your sprint should not last longer than a 4 week sprint, right? So your sprint can go from 1 week to pretty much about 4 weeks. I've worked in an environment where they did a 2 week sprint. I've worked in an environment where they did a 3 week sprint. However, I've never worked in any environment that they're doing a 4 week sprint, but I do know people that are working in environments that are doing 4 week sprints. But again, however, how long your sprint is, just make sure that when you're creating your sprint in Jira, you're creating the sprint based on the time box of your sprint. So if you guys are doing a 2 week sprint, just make sure that when you're creating your sprint in Jira, you are creating it to last for that time frame, for that 2 weeks time frame. So at the start of your sprint, right, at the beginning of your sprint, your team will have your sprint planning meeting, which I've talked about it so many times in my channel. So at the beginning of your sprint, your team will have your planning meeting where your entire team will get together doing your sprint planning to go in your backlog with the support of your product owner to prioritize on the work, to select the highest priority of user stories that they want to deliver during that sprint. So your team they'll go in the backlog and pull the highest priority stories that are adding value to the business for that particular sprint. Pull those user story into your sprint backlog, and then now your team will commit on those user story based on the velocity of the team. They will commit and do their best to deliver those user stories. So the goal of every sprint is pretty much for your team to deliver a potentially shippable product increment at the end of every sprint. So the goal is we want to make sure that at the end of the spring, whatever your team deliver, um, it's something that, let's say, is adding a lot of value to the business, and this is something that your business can actually, use. So we want to make sure that it's potentially shippable increment at the end of at the end of the sprint. Um, Let me go ahead and actually show you guys on how to create your sprint right now. So for you to create your sprint, you want to make sure you log into Jira, of course, and you want to make sure that you are on the correct project. So if you see right here where I'm pointing my mouse where it says project, make sure that you are on the correct project. If you just simply click on that project, look for the project that you are working on. Make sure you're on the correct project. You want to actually be on the backlog view when you're creating your sprint. So if you see right here on the left corner where I'm pointing my mouse, you want to click where it says backlog. You want to be on this backlog view when you are about to create a sprint. So what you see right here, this right here where it says sprint 15, this is your sprint backlog. So this only shows you the work that your team is um, currently working on for that specific sprint. And everything that you see in the bottom part where it says backlog, this is your product backlog, right? So this kind of contains everything that your team is ever going to deliver for the end goal of that project that they're working. Your backlog is going to keep growing. Your product owner is going to keep getting requirement from the business and is going to keep adding um, user stories in here for your team that they're going to potentially deliver in the future. So your backlog is going to just keep getting bigger and bigger. It's just going to keep growing bigger and bigger. So to create a sprint, like I said, you want to make sure you're in the correct project. You want to be on this view, on the backlog view. Once you're on this backlog view, you want to now, if you see over here, it says create sprint. All you need to do right now is just go ahead and click on where it says create sprint. Then it automatically actually creates your sprint. When you've already, if you already have other sprints that are already created in Jira, then it will automatically create a sprint for you. But if it's the first time you're creating a sprint in Jira, let's say the very start of your sprint one, you you click create and it will ask you to manually input the date. Which I'll show you right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and edit this one. This one has already created the sprint. Once I hit create sprint, it automatically creates the next sprint. If I go here and hit create sprint again, it will automatically create sprint 17. Okay, but let me just show you how to edit a sprint. Let's say if it's your very first time that you are creating your sprint one, because it will not automatically create sprint one for you. You have to manually do it. But once you create your first sprint, you want to create your other sprints after that, like your sprint two or three and so forth. It will automatically create it for you once you have created your first sprint. But for your very first sprint, let's just assume, right, you created your very first sprint, and then what it will do is it will ask you to input the date. So I'll just go ahead and edit this to show you guys what it will look like if this is your very first sprint you're creating. So of course, it has a sprint name, which is something that if it's your very first time you're creating a sprint, you put your sprint name here, the name of your team or whatever, however you guys want to call your sprints, your sprints. You just make sure that the name you type the name here. Um, Jira kind of like customize it for you where it can auto create your next sprint just like it just did when I hit create, it automatically created because the duration right here, if you look at it right, it says custom, right? So it automatically just customize your next, it auto just create your next sprint for you. But I'll go ahead and show you how to, like I said, if it's your very first time you're creating your first sprint, you have to manually input this date. Okay, so you go ahead and put the date that you want your sprint to start. Let's just say if you want your first sprint to start today, you go ahead and put the date today, and then 2 weeks from today, you go ahead and put your end date, which is the 20th, right? Because remember, if your sprint starts on a Friday, it will end 2 weeks after that on a Thursday, right? If you're doing a 2 week sprint. So this is how you actually create a sprint. Just always make sure when you guys are doing your sprint planning, you have your product owner at your sprint goal or have your team come up with a sprint goal. But again, the purpose of this um video today is to create a sprint. We're not doing sprint planning, so we don't really need to add the sprint goal today. We just go ahead now and hit and click on update. Once you do that, it just automatically um put the date. So if you see in here, the dates are here, right? It starts on this date and it's gonna end on that date. Let's try to create another sprint. If you want to create a sprint 17, it's going to automatically create it. Like I said, it's going to auto create the sprint because this is not our first time we're creating a sprint in Jira. So we're just going to go ahead and click create and it just automatically creates your next sprint and so forth. If you want to create another sprint, sprint 18, it will automatically, like I said, create your next sprint. One thing that I always do, I always make sure I create at least 5 sprints in advance, just so my product owner, if they are spending time in creating user stories, I want to make sure that they already have the sprint, I already have the sprint created in advance. So as they are creating the user stories, they know if they know exactly which sprint your team is going to work on that user story, they can just go ahead and move that user story to that specific sprint backlog. So it's really good for you to work, kind of like pre-create your sprint in advance so that way once your product owner is adding stories in the backlog, and if they know exactly where that story is going to be worked on, you want to make sure that that sprint has already been created. They can just go ahead and start putting this prioritizing the stories and start putting them in the backlog. So that's pretty much it about how to create a sprint. It's pretty, like I said, it's very simple, very easy. Just, go in here and click create. If I hit create again, it's gonna create my next sprint. So, and I can actually show you how to also delete a sprint. Honestly, if you click on here, you can just go ahead and delete the sprint. Let's say you create too many sprints and you don't want those, all those many sprints. Right now, you can just go ahead and click delete. It will remove that sprint. So if I go ahead and click delete, it automatically going to delete, asks you to delete. Is this the sprint you want to delete? You just click yes, and it deletes that sprint. You see that? If I want to also delete the next sprint, you just go in here and click on the three dots. Right here, click on these three dots and click on delete. It's going to ask you, is this a sprint you want to delete? You say yes. Of course, I don't just delete sprint unless, again, we don't need that sprint, right? But for the most part, if you do ever, whatever reason you have to delete a sprint, that's how you do it. So that's pretty much it about this video. If you like this video, leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more of this type of videos, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment, like, and share this video. And like I said, go ahead and watch my sprint planning video to better understand on how to facilitate the sprint planning. And I also have other videos out there that might also help you in your Scrum journey. If you're having any issues with anything, don't hesitate to leave me a comment on the specific topic that you would like me to do a video on. So thank you guys again so much, and I'll see you in my next video.